Okay, let's get started. And we do encourage interaction throughout the presentation. So please, if you have any questions, just put those in chat. You can also select the raise hand feature in the reaction section of your screen. It's just down there at the bottom. And again, welcome to the program compliance portion of annual training. My name is Olga Ginchin, and I'm the School Health Services Administrator for the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, otherwise known as the department. Today, we also have with us here from PCG, John Ward, Rose Jensen, and Lori Bob. From the Colorado Department of Education, we have Omar Estrada. And besides myself from the department, we also have Tracy Gonzalez. So thanks everyone for being here. We appreciate all the participants from across the state attending these trainings. And I think we are good to go here. So I will hand it over to John. Thanks, John.
Yep. Thanks, Olga. So yeah, welcome everybody again to the program compliance session. Here is today's agenda. We'll go through brief introduction. So a few introduction slides, some background slides. We'll then go through program compliance, helpful tips and resources and contacts. And then at the very end of the presentation, we won't go through it, but just know in the appendix at the end of this PowerPoint, there is the scoring rubric for the comprehensive review. Okay, so just like all of our trainings, we like to provide a kind of a synopsis of all the different acronyms that are contained within this PowerPoint. And as always, I will do my best to spell out every acronym as I'm talking. Feel free to use that chat feature if you have any questions, or if I miss a acronym that you're not sure what it means, and I will backtrack a little bit and spell it out. But just know if you do reference this PowerPoint later on, that you have all these acronyms, 3 different slides of acronyms that are actually within this PowerPoint. Okay, so you may have heard me say over the years that this program is both federally and state funded. So just wanted to kind of break apart the various agencies that operate both indirectly and directly within the SHS program. So federal government really meaning or in talking about Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS. So this is the federal governing body that passes down all of the various guidance, rules, and regulations that each of these reimbursement programs must follow. So state government, moving on over to that middle section, that would be in this program, the department, or HCPF that you just heard Olga talk about, but we refer to them as the department. That's state government's going to follow all of the federal regulations that are passed down by CMS and operate the reimbursement program as well. And then obviously, this program and any programs alike would not be where they are today and even operating, obviously, without the districts themselves. So kind of going into a little bit more detail and applying that information to the SHS program itself. That state agency, again, the department, they're the program policy expert. They're going to enforce the guidelines that CMS passes down. They're going to hold trainings such as this one, as well as in-person trainings, and be the ultimate approver or denier of extension requests for various program actions. So typically, that state agency will hire a contracted company or to help facilitate the program and help administer the program. So that is where Public Consulting Group, or PCG, comes into play with the SHS program. So we provide the technology that allows districts to participate in the random moment time study, or RMTS, report their costs on the various cost reports, as well as provide a help desk for districts to contact us via phone and email. You also have the Colorado Department of Education. So they help you, we like to kind of joke around, they help you spend your reimbursement money. The department and PCG helps you receive that reimbursement. Department of Education, or CD, helps you spend that reimbursement. So that's via the reimbursement spending report, as well as your local services plan, or LSP for short. That is just a couple of the many different areas of expertise that CD provides to the program and districts. You also have stakeholders. So there are stakeholders in all the various regions. Stakeholders are more of the tenured and experienced and knowledgeable district Medicaid coordinators within the program. So there is a stakeholder map showing who your stakeholder is, as well as all the various stakeholders listed as well as their areas of expertise. So might have one that really has some good recommendations for RMTS, even cost reporting, different sizes of districts as it relates to transportation. So if you ever have a question about transportation, or possibly thinking about starting to report transportation, always highly recommend reaching out to a stakeholder who has experience with that, as well as matching kind of a similar size to your district. The following slides kind of go into a little bit more detail that we're going to kind of skip over. If you would like a more in-depth kind of presentation with these slides, highly recommend watching or reviewing the RMTS training session that occurred earlier this morning. So once all these sessions are posted, that training in of itself will have a more in-depth dive into these slides. But did want to mention the bottom left agency and just billers in general. They help you, and it is optional to contract with a biller, but they do help you bill for those direct services that your providers are providing throughout the year. So help you bill Medicaid or Health First Colorado and submit those claims as well. All right, so let's jump into program compliance. So program compliance, one of the key things I'm sure that jumps into your mind is the comprehensive review. So that is the compliance function or audit vehicle for this program is the comprehensive review. So just wanted to go through some reminders. Again, as you are completing your annual cost report, as well as your desk review, if you are selected this year for a comprehensive review, you should get that notification a few business days after you complete your desk review. So just wanted to touch on some reminders before we go through the review process itself. And these are reminders also that you should be applying while you're filling out a cost report or even a staff list. So starting off, that first bullet point, review licensure dates prior to placing an individual on the staff pull list. So you should always not only have their licensure on hand for all your direct service providers, but also review the dates to ensure you're not placing them on the staff list for a time period they did not have an active licensure. It'll make more sense once we go through this presentation of why you're going to hear me talk about licensure so much, but that will come later. But on top of the dates of the licensure, always ensure that the job category, or whether they're like an occupational therapist or a physical therapist, always ensure that what is listed on that provider's licensure matches the job category you are entering them into the onto your staff list. So if they have licensure to be an SLPA, ensure that you're not adding them onto your staff list as an SLP. If you are reviewed and we notice that during their review, you'll have to zero out their costs because they do not have the proper licensure. On all the payroll pages as well as contracted pages, You'll notice a green bar next to each provider, about like middle of each of those pages. We call that the green job span bar. If you hover over that green job span bar, it'll display the exact dates that someone was added to the SAP list, as well as taken off the SAP list if they were taken off. So it's always good just to review that to ensure you're not reporting costs for time they were not on the SAP list. As it relates to the annual cost report, always keep in mind you can only report payroll costs associated with services provided while on the direct service SAP list. So again, dates of service, quarterly side, dates of payments, but again, that job span bar is good to always reference. Please don't just automatically upload someone's 100% of their salary. More than likely, the claiming system will flag it and require you to enter an explanation for that warning. So just keep in mind, always review time on the SAP list and make sure everything you're reporting is allowable. Report other costs under the appropriate service type. So really what this is talking about on the direct, so the annual dropdown and then direct medical other costs. Ensure that you're not, for instance, reporting nursing materials and supplies under occupational therapy. If you are reviewed and we see some nursing costs in there, we will have you remove those costs and you won't receive any partial reimbursement for those nursing costs. If we're still talking about that example, always put them in the appropriate service type. Always utilize the non-allowable federal funds field to report, again, federal funds or non-allowable costs. It is recommended that you report a provider's gross payroll costs and then use that non-allowable federal funds field to report any federal funds or non-allowable costs. So it's just a recommendation. It definitely more detail on the cost reports, the better. I've heard in the past from new coordinators that their predecessor did that and it really helped them kind of show a paper trail and know how they completed that cost report and how really the next cost report should be completed as well. So again, just creates that paper trail, creates that extra detail that could help out yourself or someone else. And then lastly, review attendance records. This might seem like a little bit of an odd one to include, but even little pieces of documentation like attendance records are still important. They still need to be accurate. Ensure, I know it can be tough here and there, especially with attendance records, but ensure a student's not being marked absent when they weren't absent, because if we do see a direct service being billed and the student is marked absent on that same day, we're obviously going to follow up and more than likely that will be a finding. Okay, so in terms of the timeline for the comprehensive review, so you will be, if you are selected in any given year, you will receive a email notification letting you know that you have been selected. So you'll receive one longer email with details about the review, what sort of documentation we're going to be asking for, as well as the username to your FTP site. In a second email, much shorter, but you'll receive it quickly after, that email will contain the password to your FTP site. So just an added layer of security there is the only reason for that second email. But again, that second email will include your password to your folder. Next up, districts will upload their documentation within 20 calendar days of that notification email. Again, that's through their FTP site that PCG provides. Next, once we receive that documentation, PCG will review that documentation and send any follow-up questions to the district. Could just be clarification on a piece of documentation and question about, let's say, a direct medical other cost item of how it's being used. Or if we need additional documentation, that's another type of follow-up that we would do as well. Once we have all that documentation and it's been reviewed, we'll always send the district a summary email of the findings that we have found, just in case there is any last piece of documentation that the district wants to send that would clear up or resolve one of those findings. But it's also meant to just make sure everyone is on the same page in terms of findings. So once that is completed, we'll send the comprehensive review results to the department for their review and approval. And once they approve, we'll send out the summary reports, which contain the results of the review for each scoring category, as well as the next steps at the bottom of that document. One key reminder here, if you are selected for a comprehensive review, part of that review, and we'll go through what all is in terms of documentation is reviewed later on, but a piece of that relates to billing. So we'll ask for IEPs or other plans of care, attendance records, and service logs. It is definitely recommended that as you're pulling that information for that list of students, you also pull the parental consent forms, because as you can see here by that last bullet, the CD or OMAR will reach out at a later date, much later date, and request those parental consent forms as part of that review. So just highly recommend, just as you're pulling that documentation, you might as well just pull the parental consent forms as well for those students, because the CD will reach out to ask for those eventually. All right, so just comprehensive overview, and just like the name, reviews are comprehensive. We'll look at the most recently completed annual cost report, as well as a random quarterly MAC cost report as well. We'll look at licensure, 100% of transportation. If your district does report transportation, we'll ask for all of that documentation as well. So it's always good to, just like filling out your annual cost report, it's always good to get your transportation department kind of going on this if you are selected. With any district review, there is an optional entrance call and exit call that you can request. Just reply back to that notification email or the email with your review results with some dates and times that work for you, and we'll get that scheduled. But the entrance call is really used to go through the data request workbook, or really the list of documentation that we're asking for. We'll go over that A to Z to ensure everyone understands what we're kind of asking for in terms of documentation and what details need to be included on each piece of documentation. So it's really just an overview call to ensure there's no last questions. But again, that's optional. Optional exit call, just go over findings on that summary report, make sure there is no confusion on anything, as well as there's no confusion on the next steps needed. And then, yeah, so last one, summary report will be provided with the results of the review upon completion. Just keep in mind, if any finding does require an adjustment to a cost report, those cost reports will be reopened by the time you receive your summary report. So you can kind of just go by that summary report, make the adjustments, and recertify those cost reports. Okay, so what all is reviewed? So cost data, so payroll costs, again, both for the MAC cost report or quarterly cost report and the annual side of things as well. So salaried staff as well as contracted staff for the time they were on the staff pool list. Other costs, just invoices or receipts. If you order anything off Amazon, those paid kind of receipts or invoices that you can get off Amazon, we'll accept those as well. Direct medical services really relates to transportation and that one-way trips denominator, as well as if you report not only specialized transportation, the roster for the transportation services IEP ratio as well. IEPs and other medical plans of care. So just really ensuring scope, frequency, and duration are listed in those documents. Always keep in mind that if it's an other plan of care attached to an IEP, that the IEP really trumps everything. So scope, duration, and frequency, if just listed in the IEP in that scenario, would be okay. Or if it's split between the two documents, that's fine as well. But also keep in mind, and we kind of talked about this even before free care was implemented, if it's a standalone other medical plan of care, scope, duration, and frequency must be in that other medical plan of care. So it's the same requirements between IEPs and other medical plans of care, same requirements and rules. Again, just if it's a standalone other medical plan of care, just ensure those three things are listed in there. Licensure, pretty straightforward here. Just always know with licensure as well as plans of care, if they lapse during the middle of the year, that's fine. Just please send us the renewed version as well. Don't just automatically, I've seen it before, but don't just automatically send us the most recent licensure. Ensure what you're sending us covers either the date of service or the time period that we're looking for. And the general statistical information kind of goes with direct medical services. Same thing with, transportation ratios. Also with transportation, we'll ask for a 1 month sample of bus logs, just to ensure, obviously, bus logs are being kept and maintained, as that is a requirement. So in terms of reminders with various pieces of documentation, and again, this is something that we would go through on that entrance call, so never hesitate to request one of those. More than happy to schedule those for you. But in terms of payroll costs, fund and account codes, pretty much the quickest reason why we would send back documentation is because fund and account codes are not listed. On the annual side of things, it's fine if it's just up at the top, but it really should be with the individual items, the listed fund and account codes for that line item. Dates of service for annual. So on payroll journals or other payroll reports, I typically see it just up at the top for the annual side that this pay is associated with services provided from this date to this date. But on the MAC or quarterly side, please ensure you are including pay dates next to each line item. That ensures that pay, whether it be salary or benefits, was reported in the correct quarter, because again, it's the quarterly side is working off pay dates. And then also, please break out salary and benefits. Please don't just send us one kind of gross line item for every biweekly or once a month. Please break out salary and benefits onto separate lines. Other costs, again, invoices, receipts, just ensure that the name of the item is listed. Again, the fund or account code and purchase price are listed on that receipt or invoice as well. IEPs and other medical plans of care, we already talked about this. Scope, duration, and frequency, but similar to licensure, just please ensure the iteration of that plan of care is for that period of time for the dates of service that we select. Just don't send us the most recent one. If there's two iterations of the plan of care that cover the listed or the selected dates of service, it's fine. Just send us both of them. And really, we're just looking for the IEPs, just the service delivery statement. Really the few pages that show the scope, duration, and frequency. But again, if you just prefer and it's easier for you all to just send us the whole document, that's fine also. And then provider licensure, make sure it covers the entire time that provider was on the staff list. It's fine if you need to send us multiple versions of provider's licensure, just ensure it covers the time selected. And with all of this, please do not just send us a 300-page PDF. We can't really, our computers, no computer can really work with that. It'll start freezing. If you could, please just break up the documentation between, let's say, like annual payroll, transportation, licensure, and then you can even have a billing folder as well. It really helps us out, and we can't really, again, work with a 300-page PDF. Adobe will just start freezing with us. And then, Deborah, we can, yeah, we can follow up with your question about a one-on-one training after today. Depending if it's on a specific item or we have those, you'll be a part of that new coordinator program also. So we'll touch base after today. Okay, so in terms of scoring, if your district reports transportation, your review score will be out of 12. If your district does not report transportation, it will be out of 8. Each scoring category is a pass or fail, so there's no minimum. If there is a finding, it will be a fail. And the overall score will depict what the next steps are needed from your district. So this graph, we're now looking at last year's comprehensive review results and scoring. This graph probably doesn't make too much sense because it doesn't display what the different scoring categories are, but it's meant to show just in general. We were, for each scoring category, above 80%, which is good. On the next slide, we'll go through the specifics of this graph and kind of the different outliers that we want to mention for everybody, just to keep in mind, not only for the review, but cost reports as well. So 18 districts were reviewed, 10 did not report transportation. So we had 8 districts selected who reported transportation, but again, a pretty even split in between transportation and non-transportation. So this is kind of the table version of that graph showing the various scoring categories and the resulting scores. So we'll point out some outliers on here, but in general, you'll see that there were findings, a good amount of findings in both the annual payroll costs as well as quarterly. That's pretty typical, just due to the sample size that we select is probably the most, the highest sample size among the scoring categories. So just more chance for possible errors, but it goes back to all the things that we previously talked about. Ensuring on the annual side, it's dates of service, quarterly side, it's date of payment, things like that. Always utilizing the federal funds not allowable field to report those not allowable costs, things like that. But a couple outliers here, licensure. This is typically a category that is near 100%. But we did have findings due to the reasons I stated earlier about the reminders, just ensuring the job category matches the job category you're entering them on the staff list as, ensuring they have renewed licensure if it does lapse in the middle of the year, things like that. And then other than that, we did have an attendance record finding, very, very uncommon. But again, just that friendly reminder that even those little pieces of documentation as it relates to this program need to obviously be accurate and match with kind of what you're billing for as well. So just an outlier. I'm sure this year and next year we'll be back up to 100%, but just kind of the random finding that we had this past year. Other than that, a positive outlier, I would say, is transportation other costs. If you were to ask me one scoring category that I can guarantee you there will be a finding. And again, this goes to like the sample size as well, in terms of how much costs districts do report in transportation other costs, definitely plays a factor. But typically we have a few districts with a few districts with findings in this scoring category. But this past year, we only had one district with a finding. So again, just keep in mind, strictly doesn't make the bus go. Fuel and oil, maintenance and repairs, windshield repair, hail damage repair, kind of your typical Colorado things, all strictly make the bus go. Driver uniforms, drug tests, cameras, radios don't necessarily make the bus go. So those examples of items are unallowable. But overall, a good mixture, just as we're, if you attended like the RMTS training as well, with these new job categories that are being added, always keep in mind licensure when you're completing your staff list, as well as even your cost reports as well. So payroll costs reminders. Talked about that green job span bar on all the payroll and contracted pages of the cost reports. Helpful tool. It's very quickly to use, just hover over it and it'll give you those exact dates. So always good to review while you're filling out your cost report. It also does export into Excel if you use the import export feature. So just key reminder with that. It's always good to check with HR to ensure you're aware of who may have left the district, so you're not reporting costs for someone that is no longer with the district, or reporting their full payroll costs if they left, let's say, like the last month of the year or the program fiscal year or anything like that. It's always good to check with HR. We also heard at in-person trainings last week that if you're having any issues with HR, you can always go to someone recommended going to IT, because more than likely they can pull kind of the report that you're looking for, and maybe specific to the job categories that are allowable within this program. So just another recommendation, but it's also a good place if you have any questions on best methods. Always good to reach out to your stakeholder, because they probably had to deal with one of the experiences that you're calling them about. Staff costs for eligible free care providers. That is just talking about that the free care costs that you see on your annual cost report will mirror or match what you enter on the direct service side of the cost report as well. So the same payroll costs as well as contracted costs and other costs or materials and supplies. Those costs will be brought down onto the free care line and used in the free care calculation. Just keep in mind, you can report materials and supplies related to free care. In that same area, you would report the direct service version or the direct medical other costs. Same area, you would just report those costs in as well. And always, it's recommended to use that compensation federal fund / not allowable field to report those related costs. So we do recommend reporting those gross costs and utilizing that field to report any non-allowable costs. Licensure, again, we're covering it pretty thoroughly here just because of the last year's findings, but always ensure they have the proper licensure before entering them on the staff list. Ensure your providers, as kind of we get into free care more and more, always ensure your providers are trained to know what type of plan of care or medical plan of care a student is on, so they can answer those random moment time studies appropriately. But yeah, past that, just ensure proper licensure. Dates on the licensure are covers the time they're on the staff list, and that you have a copy of it as well before placing them on the direct service staff list. All right, so if you go through a comprehensive review and have a finding in any of the scoring categories, you will have to watch a program compliance training for that scoring category. These used to be called strategic intervention trainings, but just through stakeholder feedback that they've gathered from their districts, they recommend changing the name of them. So they are now, you all chose program compliance training. So that is what they are now known as. But yeah, so if you have a finding in any scoring category, you'll have to watch that corresponding PCT training. One recommendation, even though that these are pretty much related to comprehensive reviews, if you ever want a quick refresher on an item, even if you're not selected for a review, could be any time of the year. You can always watch any of them. They're about like 10-minute videos each if you want a quick refresher on anything. And this is what that PDF generally looks like once you download it. There's 5 different PCT trainings for direct medical costs, licensure, transportation, the billing and service piece of the review, as well as quarterly MAC financials. So you have the corresponding scoring category on the left-hand side, and then just the link to play the recording on the right-hand side. And these are located on the resources section of the PCG claiming system, which is just that, or just on the homepage of the claiming system. All right, so in the event that your district scores a score of 8 out of 12 if you report transportation, or 5 out of 8 if you don't report transportation, on top of those PCT trainings, you'll also have to complete a corrective action plan. So if you fall under this scenario after your review or anything like that, the department will reach out with more detail about the CAP or corrective action plan, as well as kind of like what the process will be. But from a very high level, it's just describing the current errors, meaning the errors that were found in your review, how you're going to correct those errors, and how you're going to prevent those errors from occurring in the future. That's kind of the process in a very general, high-level sense. There's a lot more that goes into it, but it's just like this slide says, it's really creating a corrective action plan to ensure these, I guess, errors or issues don't occur further on. All right, any questions? Okay, so just going over program resources before I pass it back off to Olga. Just know you always have a ton of resources available to you all at any given time of the year. You have the program manual, which is really the A to Z document of the program. If you have a very specific question, more than likely it's in that document. You have the program calendar, which contains all the important dates that you should be aware of. So cost report opening and due dates, staff list opening and due dates, when you're set to receive your monthly interim payments each and every month, things like that are all listed, and we do update that prior to the start of every fiscal year. You also have the newsletters. So those are the quarterly newsletters. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter and want to receive them, please reach out to Tracy and she can get you signed up for those. If you're with us for the MAC training, the answer key to that Venn diagram activity will be attached to the upcoming newsletter here in a month and a half or so. And it always, includes important updates with the program and things, FAQs from trainings and things like that. So it's always good to be on that email list. And then you have all our contact information. So Olga at the department, Omar at CDE, as well as the 2 different PCG help desks. You have our email addresses as well as phone numbers. You may have noticed on really anywhere on the claiming system, a blue help bubble that if you click it, you fill out a quick form. It's essentially an email to PCG. So if you don't like to remember our email addresses, you can definitely just contact us that way as well, and we'll follow up via email. But that is everything from me. So if there are no questions, I will pass it off to Olga.
Okay, thank you, John. And I know everyone is probably anxious to log off and go about your day. We would probably be able to give you some time back, but also just wanted to take a second before we log off to also just celebrate some of the wins that we've had with the program lately. And I think that's a great way to end the day. So I can think of a couple of celebrations. It could be something that is program wide, or if there's something specifically that has happened in your district or BOCES that you'd like to share with the larger group. I know we do still have a handful of coordinators that are on the line here. Love to hear some of your celebrations if you'd like to share them. And thank you for the good feedback, Tracy. And just as a reminder, addressing another question I got here, those program compliance trainings are on the PCG website at any time in the resources section. So you don't have to wait until after your comprehensive review is final. You can review those program compliance trainings at any time on the PCG website. All right, so any celebrations? I don't want to steal anyone's thunder. Like I said, I can I can think of a couple. If anyone would like to unmute themselves and or just toss something in the chat. You know, one thing that is a big celebration that I can think of is that we've now seen the full cycle of free care, and you've seen the reimbursement that you were able to receive from that. And also, I think that being able to add school psychs, that's exactly, Linda, that's what I was about to say. So taking that supervision requirement away from the school psychologist licensure requirements, I think is a really huge win too. And really wanted to shout out to Shannon for just really working so hard to make that happen. So I think that is a huge win for the program as well. All right, last chance for any celebrations or any questions that you have not had addressed yet. Okay, don't want to take up too much time, so we will go ahead and log off. Again, thank you so much for attending these annual trainings. Really appreciate you all being here, being involved, and staying up to date with everything that's going on in the program. We are still here to answer any questions. We'll hang out for just a little bit longer if you did think of something. And of course, you can always email us, you know, toss us a phone call, that kind of thing. And we're happy to answer questions at any time. Thanks, everyone.